Darkness lay over the deep. No shape, no shore, no light, only water without end, and a wind moving across the face of it. Nothing had a name yet. Nothing had ever been. And into that silence a voice spoke and said, "Let there be light." And there was light. The light was good. It stood apart from the dark, and the darkness drew back, and the one became two, day and night, evening and morning, the first day the world had ever known. Then the voice divided the waters. It set a great space between them, an arching emptiness above the sea, and called it sky. And under that sky the waters below were gathered into one place, and dry ground rose up out of them, still wet, still steaming, and this was called land, and the gathered waters were called seas. And it was good. And the land was told to bring forth life, and it obeyed. Grass pushed up through the soil. Trees rose and thickened and hung heavy with fruit, each carrying its own seed, each able to make more of itself. The earth, only days old, was already green and growing. Lights were set in the sky then, a greater light to rule the day and a lesser to rule the night, and the stars scattered like grain across the dark. They marked the seasons and the days and the years, wheeling in silence over a world that had no one yet to watch them. The waters filled with living things, creatures that swarmed and darted in the deep, and great beasts that moved through the sea. Birds rose into the open sky, and they were blessed and told to multiply, to fill the waters and the air. Then the land brought forth its own, cattle and creeping things and wild animals, each after its own kind, breathing, moving, alive. And then the voice said something it had not said before. "Let us make man in our image." And from the dust of the ground a man was formed, and breath was breathed into him, and he became a living being. Male and female they were made, and they were blessed and given the whole earth, every plant, every fruit, every living thing, and told to be fruitful, to fill the world, and to keep it. And the voice looked over all that had been made, and it was very good. On the seventh day the work was finished, and there was rest, and that day was set apart from all the others, made holy, a stillness at the center of the week. There was a garden planted in the east, in a place called Eden, and a river ran through it and split into four, watering the ground. In that garden the man was set, to work it and to guard it. And in the middle of it grew two trees, one that gave life, and one that gave the knowledge of good and evil. Of every tree you may eat, the man was told, but not that one. The day you eat from it, you will die. Then the man was given the animals, one by one, to name, and he named them all, the beasts of the field and the birds of the air, but among them none was found to stand beside him. So a deep sleep fell on him, and from his own side a rib was taken, and from that a woman was formed and brought to him. And the man said, "At last, this is bone of my bone." And the two of them stood in the garden together, naked and unashamed, knowing no fear, knowing no death, knowing nothing yet of what a single choice could do. Now the serpent was more cunning than any creature of the field, and it came to the woman with a question. "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" "Only one," she answered, "the one in the middle. We must not eat it, or even touch it, or we will die." "You will not die," the serpent said. "God knows that the day you eat it your eyes will open and you will be like him, knowing good and evil." She looked at the tree. The fruit was good to eat. It was beautiful to see, and it promised wisdom. She took it. She ate, and she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate too. And their eyes did open. But what they saw first was themselves, that they were naked, and for the first time there was shame. They sewed leaves together to cover their bodies, and when they heard the sound of God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, they hid among the trees. "Where are you?" the voice called, and the man answered from his hiding place, I heard you, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid. Who told you that you were naked? The voice said. Did you eat from the tree I commanded you not to touch? And the man pointed to the woman. The woman you gave me, she gave me the fruit. And the woman pointed to the serpent. The serpent deceived me. And so it moved down the line, each one blaming the next, and none of them undoing what was done. Judgment came. To the serpent, a curse. It would crawl on its belly and eat dust, and between its offspring and the woman's there would be enmity forever. A heel would be struck, a head would be crushed. To the woman, pain in childbirth, and a longing for her husband who would rule over her. And to the man, the ground itself was cursed. No longer would it give freely. Now it would fight him with thorns and thistles, and only by the sweat of his face would he eat, until the day he returned to the dust he was taken from. For dust you are, the voice said, and to dust you will return. He named his wife Eve, the mother of all the living. And they were clothed in skins, and then they were sent out, driven from the garden from the tree of life, so they could not reach it and live forever in their fallen state. And at the entrance to Eden, a guardian was set, with a flaming sword turning every way, to keep the road to the tree of life closed. Outside the garden, the world began. Eve bore a son, Cain, and then his brother Abel. Abel became a keeper of sheep, and Cain worked the ground. And in time each brought an offering, Cain from the fruit of the soil, Abel from the firstborn of his flock. And Abel's offering was accepted, and Cain's was not. Cain's face fell, and a warning came to him. Why are you angry? If you do what is right, will you not be lifted up? But if you do not, sin is crouching at your door. It desires you. You must master it. But Cain did not master it. He spoke to his brother in the field, and when they were alone, he rose up and killed him. Where is your brother? The voice asked. I don't know, Cain said. Am I my brother's keeper? What have you done? Came the answer. Your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. And Cain was cursed from the very soil that had opened its mouth to swallow that blood. It would no longer yield to him. He would be a restless wanderer on the earth. My punishment is more than I can bear, Cain said. Anyone who finds me will kill me. But a mark was placed on him, a mark of protection, so that no one who found him would strike him down. And Cain went out from the presence of God and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. He built a city there and named it after his son. And from him came a line of men, herdsmen who lived in tents, and those who played the harp and pipe, and those who forged tools of bronze and iron. And one of them, Lamech, took 2 wives, and boasted to them of blood he had spilled, of a man he had killed for wounding him. The violence of the world already deepening, already proud of itself. But Eve bore another son, Seth, in the place of Abel. And to Seth a son was born, and in those days people began to call on the name of the Lord. The generations unrolled. Adam lived and had children and died. Seth lived and had children and died. And on down the line, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, each man living hundreds of years, each fathering sons and daughters, each in the end returning to the dust, the same phrase falling like a bell at the close of every life. And he died, and he died, and he died. Only one was different. Enoch walked with God, and then he was not, for God took him. He did not die like the others. He was simply gone. But his son Methuselah lived longer than any man ever had, nearly 1,000 years, and then he too died. And his line came down to a man named Lamech, and Lamech had a son, and named him Noah, and said, This one will bring us comfort from the toil of our hands. From the ground the Lord has cursed, and the earth grew crowded, and it grew wicked. Every inclination of the human heart bent toward evil, all the time. Violence filled the land, and it grieved God to his heart that he had made them, and he said, I will wipe them from the face of the earth, man and beast and bird alike, for I regret that I made them." But Noah found favor. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked with God. And to Noah came the word that the end had come, that the earth would be destroyed by water, and that he must build a vessel, an ark of wood, sealed inside and out with pitch, with rooms and a door and a roof, vast enough to hold his family and a remnant of every living thing. 2 of every kind of creature would come to him, male and female, to be kept alive, and food for all of them must be gathered and stored. And Noah did everything exactly as he was told. Then the day came. Noah and his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives went into the ark, and the animals came pair by pair, and God shut the door behind them. And the fountains of the deep burst open, and the windows of the sky were flung wide, and the rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights. The waters rose, they lifted the ark off the ground. They climbed the hills and swallowed them. They rose higher than the highest mountains, and everything that breathed on the dry land died. Every man, every beast, every bird, every creeping thing. Only those in the ark remained, floating on the face of a drowned world, and the waters held their height for 150 days. But God remembered Noah, and a wind passed over the earth, and the waters began to sink. The fountains and the windows were closed. The rain stopped. And slowly, slowly the flood drew back, until the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, and the peaks reappeared one by one out of the sea. Noah opened a window and sent out a raven, and it flew back and forth, never settling. Then he sent a dove, but it found no place to rest and returned to his hand. He waited 7 days and sent it again, and this time it came back with a fresh olive leaf in its beak. And Noah knew the waters were going down. He waited 7 more days and sent it a 3rd time, and it did not return at all. The world was dry. And they came out, Noah, his family, and every creature, onto ground, washed clean and empty. And Noah built an altar and made an offering, and God smelled it and said in his heart, "Never again will I curse the ground because of man, never again will I destroy all life as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, will never cease." And a covenant was made, and a sign was set in the sky, a bow of color arched over the clouds. Whenever it appears, God said, "I will remember the promise between me and every living thing, that never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all flesh." But Noah was still a man. He planted a vineyard, and he drank of its wine, and became drunk, and lay uncovered inside his tent. And Ham, his son, saw his father's nakedness, and went out and told his brothers. But Shem and Japheth took a garment, and laid it across their shoulders, and walked in backward, their faces turned away, and covered their father without looking on him. When Noah woke and learned what had happened, he cursed the line of Ham's son Canaan, and blessed Shem and Japheth. And Noah lived on many years, and then he died. From the 3 sons of Noah the whole earth was repopulated. Their descendants spread out, the sons of Japheth to the coasts and islands, the sons of Ham into Egypt and Canaan, and the great cities of the plain, among them a mighty hunter named Nimrod, who built kingdoms. And the sons of Shem stretched eastward. Nations divided by language and land, clan by clan, name by name, filling the world again. And at first they all spoke one language. And as they moved eastward, they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them hard, and build a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and make a name for ourselves, so we are not scattered over the face of the earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower. And he said, "They are one people with one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing will be beyond them now. Come, Let us go down and confuse their language, so they cannot understand one another." And so it was. The building stopped. The people could no longer speak to each other, and they were scattered across the earth. And the city was called Babel, because there the language of all the world was confused. From that place the nations spread. And the generations of Shem came down through the years, name after name, until they reached a man named Terah, who lived in Ur of the Chaldeans and had 3 sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran died young, leaving a son named Lot. And Terah took Abram and Abram's wife Sarai, who had no children, and his grandson Lot, and set out toward the land of Canaan. But they came as far as a place called Haran, and settled there, and Terah died in Haran. And there the word came to Abram, "Leave your country, your people, your father's household, and go to a land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you." And Abram went, as he was told, though he was 75 years old and did not know where he was going. He took Sarai and Lot and everything they had gathered, and they journeyed into Canaan. And in that land the Lord appeared to him and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." And Abram built an altar there. But then a famine came, hard and heavy, and Abram went down into Egypt to survive it. And as they neared Egypt, Abram grew afraid, because Sarai was beautiful, and he feared the Egyptians would kill him to take her. So he told her, "Say you are my sister, so that it will go well with me because of you." And it happened, as he feared. The princes of Egypt saw her, and praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into Pharaoh's house, and Abram was treated well for her sake, given sheep and cattle, servants and camels. But the Lord struck Pharaoh's household with plagues because of her. And Pharaoh learned the truth and called Abram and demanded, "Why did you say she was your sister? Here is your wife. Take her and go." And Abram was sent away out of Egypt with all he had. He came back up into the land, richer now in livestock and silver and gold, and Lot with him, also grown wealthy. But the land could not hold them both. Their flocks were too many and their herdsmen quarreled. So Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between us. We are family. The whole land is before you. If you go left, I'll go right. If you go right, I'll go left." And Lot looked out and saw the plain of the Jordan well watered, green as the garden of God, and he chose it all for himself, and moved his tents as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked, sinning greatly against the Lord. And after Lot had gone, the Lord told Abram to look in every direction, north, south, east, west, for all the land he could see would be his and his descendants, who would be as countless as the dust of the earth. Then war came to the plain. 4 kings from the east marched against 5 kings of the region, and in the valley they clashed, and Sodom and Gomorrah were defeated and plundered. And Lot, living in Sodom, was seized and carried off with all his goods. When Abram heard that his nephew was taken, he armed the men of his household, 318 of them, and pursued the invaders through the night, and fell on them, and struck them and drove them far, and brought back Lot and the people and all the plunder. As he returned, the king of Sodom came out to meet him, and so did another, Melchizedek, king of Salem, a priest of God Most High, who brought out bread and wine and blessed Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, maker of heaven and earth." And Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. But to the king of Sodom, who offered him the spoils, Abram swore he would take nothing, not a thread or a sandal strap, so that no one could ever say, "I made Abram rich." After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. "Do not be afraid. I am your shield, your very great reward." But Abram said, "What can you give me? I remain childless. A servant of my house will be my heir." And he was taken outside and told, "Look up at the sky and count the stars if you can. So shall your offspring be." And Abram believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. And a covenant was cut that night. Abram was told to bring animals and divide them, laying the halves opposite each other. And birds of prey came down on the carcasses, and Abram drove them away. And as the sun set, a deep and dreadful darkness fell over him, and he was told that his descendants would be strangers in a land not their own, enslaved and mistreated 400 years, but that they would come out at last with great possessions, and the nation that enslaved them would be judged. And when the sun had gone and the dark was full, a smoking firepot and a blazing torch passed between the pieces. And on that day the Lord made his covenant with Abram, promising the land from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates. But the years passed, and Sarai still bore no children, and she had an Egyptian servant, Hagar, and she said to Abram, "Go to my servant. Perhaps I can build a family through her." And Abram listened, and Hagar conceived. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to look on her mistress with contempt, and Sarai grew bitter and treated her harshly until Hagar fled into the wilderness. And by a spring in the desert, an angel of the Lord found her and asked, "Where have you come from, and where are you going?" "I'm running from my mistress," she said. "Go back," the angel told her, "and submit to her." And then a promise, "Your descendants will be too many to count. You are with child, and you will have a son, and you will name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your misery. He will be like a wild donkey, his hand against everyone, and everyone's against him, and he will live in defiance of all his brothers." And Hagar gave a name to the Lord who spoke to her, "The God who sees me." For she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." And she went back and bore Abram a son, and he named him Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old. 13 more years passed, and the Lord appeared to Abram again and said, "I am God Almighty. Walk before me faithfully and be blameless." And he made his covenant fuller and deeper and changed his name. No longer Abram, but Abraham, father of many nations. Kings would come from him. The whole land of Canaan would belong to his offspring as an everlasting possession. And there was a sign to be kept in the flesh. Every male among them was to be circumcised, generation after generation, as the mark of the covenant. And Sarai too was given a new name, Sarah, and told she would bear a son and become the mother of nations, and kings of peoples would come from her. Abraham fell face down and laughed. A son to a man of 100, to Sarah, who is 90. And he said, "If only Ishmael might live under your blessing." And he was told, yes, Ishmael would be blessed and made fruitful, the father of princes. But the covenant would pass through the son Sarah would bear, who would be named Isaac. And that same day Abraham circumcised every male of his household, himself and Ishmael and all the rest, exactly as he had been commanded. Not long after, in the heat of the day, Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent by the great trees of Mamre, and looked up, and saw 3 men standing nearby. He ran to them and bowed low and begged them to stay. "Let water be brought to wash your feet. Rest under the tree. Let me bring a piece of bread." And he hurried to Sarah and told her to bake, and ran to the herd and chose a tender calf, and set before them curds and milk and meat, and stood by while they ate. "Where is your wife Sarah?" they asked. "There, in the tent," he said. And one of them said, "I will return to you at this time next year, and Sarah will have a son." And Sarah, listening at the tent entrance behind him, laughed to herself, worn out as she was, and her husband old. Was she to have this pleasure now? "Why did Sarah laugh?" the Lord asked. "Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return, and she will have a son." And Sarah, afraid, denied it. "I did not laugh." But he said, "Yes, you did." Then the men rose and looked down toward Sodom, and Abraham walked with them. And the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is grievous. I am going down to see." And 2 of them turned and went toward the city, But Abraham stood before the Lord and drew near and pleaded, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? If there are 50 righteous in the city, will you not spare it?" And he was answered, "For 50 I will spare it." And Abraham pressed further, ashamed but unrelenting. "What if there are 45, 40, 30, 20? What if there are only 10? And each time the answer came back, "For their sake, I will not destroy it. For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." And when he had finished speaking, the Lord went his way, and Abraham returned home. The 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting at the city gate. He rose and bowed, and urged them to spend the night in his house, and pressed them until they agreed, and he made them a meal. But before they lay down, the men of the city, young and old from every quarter, surrounded the house and shouted for Lot to bring out his guests, so they could abuse them. Lot went out to them and shut the door behind him, and pleaded with them not to do this wicked thing, even offering his own daughters in their place. But they turned on him, and pressed against him, and moved to break down the door. And the angels reached out, and pulled Lot back inside, and struck the men at the door with blindness, so that they groped uselessly in the dark and could not find the way in. "Get out," the angels told Lot. "Whoever belongs to you, your sons, your daughters, anyone, get them out, for we are going to destroy this place." But when Lot warned the men pledged to marry his daughters, they thought he was joking. And when dawn came, the angels urged Lot to hurry. And when he hesitated, they grabbed his hand and his wife's and his daughters and pulled them out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. "Flee for your lives," they said. "Don't look back. Don't stop anywhere on the plain. Run to the hills." And Lot begged to flee instead to a small town nearby, and it was granted, and the town was called Zoar. The sun had risen over the land when Lot reached Zoar, and then it fell. Burning sulfur rained down out of the sky on Sodom and Gomorrah, and the cities and the whole plain and everything growing there were destroyed, all the people, all the land. And Lot's wife, behind him, looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham, early that morning, went to the place where he had stood before the Lord, and looked down toward the plain, and saw smoke rising from the land like the smoke of a furnace. Lot was afraid to stay in Zoar, and went up into the hills and lived in a cave with his 2 daughters. And the daughters, believing there was no man left in all the earth to give them children, made their father drunk with wine on 2 nights, and lay with him, and both conceived. And their sons became the fathers of the Moabites and the Ammonites, nations that would stand against Israel for generations to come. Abraham moved on into the region of the Negev, and stayed in Gerar, and there he said again of Sarah, "She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, took her. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night, and said, "You are as good as dead, for the woman you have taken is a married woman." Abimelech had not touched her, and he protested his innocence. Did he not say she was his sister? And God said, "Yes, I know your heart was clean, and that is why I kept you from sinning. Return the woman, for the man is a prophet, and he will pray for you and you will live. But if you do not, you and all yours will die." And Abimelech rose early and confronted Abraham, and gave Sarah back, and sheep and cattle and silver, and freedom to live wherever he wished. And Abraham prayed, and God healed Abimelech and his household, for the Lord had closed every womb there because of Sarah. And then the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. She conceived, and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had said. And Abraham named him Isaac, and circumcised him on the 8th day, and Abraham was 100 years old. And Sarah said, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears will laugh with me. Who would have said that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne a son in his old age." The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Hagar, mocking, and she said to Abraham, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son. He will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." The matter distressed Abraham deeply, for Ishmael was his son too. But God told him to listen to Sarah, for it was through Isaac that his offspring would be reckoned. And yet Ishmael too would be made into a nation, because he was Abraham's child. So Abraham rose early and gave Hagar bread and a skin of water, and sent her away with the boy, and she wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water was gone, she left the boy under a bush and sat down a bowshot away, and said, "I cannot watch the boy die." And she wept. But God heard the boy crying, and an angel called to Hagar, "Do not be afraid. God has heard him. Lift the boy up and hold him, for I will make him into a great nation." And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she filled the skin, and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy as he grew up in the desert and became an archer, and his mother found him a wife from Egypt. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. "Abraham," he called, "here I am. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Early the next morning, Abraham rose. He saddled his donkey, cut the wood for the offering, took 2 servants and his son, and set out. On the 3rd day he looked up and saw the place in the distance. "Stay here," he told the servants. "The boy and I will go and worship, and then we will come back to you." He laid the wood on Isaac's shoulders, and carried the fire and the knife himself, and the 2 of them walked on together. "Father," Isaac said. "Yes, my son. The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the offering?" "God himself will provide the lamb, my son," Abraham answered, and the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place, Abraham built the altar and arranged the wood, and bound his son Isaac, and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called out from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham, here I am. Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." And Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket was a ram caught by its horns, and he took it and offered it up in place of his son. And he named that place, "The Lord will provide." And the promise came again from heaven, "Because you did this and did not withhold your son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, and through your offspring all nations of the earth will be blessed." And Sarah lived 127 years, and she died at Hebron in the land of Canaan, and Abraham mourned for her and wept. Then he rose from beside his dead and went to the Hittites, the people of the land, and asked to buy a place to bury her, for he owned no ground there, a stranger and a sojourner among them. And though they offered to give him a tomb freely, Abraham insisted on paying the full price, and bought the field of Machpelah and the cave in it, weighing out 400 shekels of silver, and there he buried Sarah, the first piece of the promised land ever to belong to him, a grave. Abraham was old now, and he called his most trusted servant and made him swear a solemn oath not to take a wife for Isaac from among the Canaanites, but to go back to Abraham's own people and find one there, and to bring her to the land, but never to take Isaac back to the country he had left. So the servant took 10 camels and gifts and set out for the city of Nahor. He made the camels kneel by a well outside the town in the evening, when the women came out to draw water, and he prayed, "Lord, let it be that the young woman I ask for a drink, who answers, 'Drink, and I'll water your camels too,' is the one you have chosen for Isaac." And before he had finished praying, a girl came out with a jar on her shoulder, beautiful, and he asked her for a little water. "Drink, my lord," she said, and lowered the jar, and then said, "I'll draw water for your camels too, until they finish." And she ran and emptied her jar into the trough, and drew again and again for all the camels. And the man watched her in silence, wondering whether the Lord had made his journey successful. Her name was Rebekah, granddaughter of Abraham's brother Nahor. And when she said there was room in her father's house, the servant bowed and worshipped and gave her gold, and she ran ahead to tell her family. Her brother Laban came out and brought them in, and food was set before the servant, but he would not eat until he had told his errand, the whole story of the oath, the well, the prayer, the answer. And Laban and Bethuel, her father, said, "This is from the Lord. Take her and go." And in the morning, when they wished to keep Rebekah a while longer, they asked her, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, "I will go." And she was blessed by her family. "May your descendants be thousands upon thousands." And she rose with her servants and rode out. And Isaac was living in the Negev, and he went out to the field one evening to meditate, and looked up and saw camels coming. And Rebekah looked up and saw a man walking toward them, and got down from her camel and covered herself with her veil. And the servant told Isaac all he had done. And Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and she became his wife, and he loved her, and he was comforted after his mother's death. Abraham lived on, and took another wife, and had more sons, and sent them away to the east, giving everything he had to Isaac. And he died at a good old age, 175 years, and his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah beside Sarah. And Ishmael had 12 sons who became tribal rulers, and then Ishmael died, and his people settled from Havilah to Shur. Now Rebekah was barren, and Isaac prayed for her, and she conceived. But the children struggled together within her, and she asked, "Why is this happening to me?" And she was told, "2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples will be separated from you. One will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." And when the time came, twins were born. The first came out red and covered with hair, and they named him Esau. Then his brother came, gripping Esau's heel, and they named him Jacob. Esau grew to be a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, and Isaac loved him. But Jacob was quiet, staying among the tents, and Rebekah loved him. And one day Jacob was cooking a stew when Esau came in from the field, exhausted and famished, and said, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm starving." "First sell me your birthright," Jacob said. And Esau said, "I'm about to die. What good is a birthright to me?" So he swore an oath and sold it, and ate and drank and got up and left. And so Esau despised his birthright for a bowl of stew. A famine came again, and Isaac went to Gerar, to Abimelech. And there, like his father before him, he said of Rebekah, "She is my sister," for he was afraid. But Abimelech saw Isaac caressing her and knew the truth, and rebuked him. Someone might have slept with her and brought guilt on us all. And he ordered that no one touch them. And Isaac planted crops in that land and reaped 100-fold, and grew rich, until the Philistines envied him and stopped up the wells his father had dug. And Isaac moved on, and dug new wells, and quarreled over them, and moved again, until he found a place where no one contended, and he named it Room Enough, for now the Lord had given them room. And Abimelech came to make a treaty with him, saying, "We see clearly that the Lord is with you." When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak he could no longer see, he called Esau and said, "I am old and do not know the day of my death. Take your bow, hunt game for me, prepare the food I love, and bring it to me, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." But Rebekah was listening, and while Esau was out hunting, she went to Jacob and told him to fetch 2 young goats, and she would prepare them the way Isaac loved, and Jacob would take the food to his father and receive the blessing meant for his brother. "But my brother is hairy and I am smooth," Jacob said. "If my father touches me, he'll know, and I'll bring a curse on myself, not a blessing." "Let the curse fall on me," Rebekah said. "Just do as I say." So she cooked the meal, and dressed Jacob in Esau's clothes, and covered his hands and neck with the goatskins, and sent him in. "Father," Jacob said. "Who is it?" Isaac asked. "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God gave me success." "Come near," Isaac said, "so I can touch you to know whether you really are Esau." And Jacob went near, and Isaac felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he did not recognize him, and he blessed him. "Are you really my son Esau?" "I am." "Then bring the food." And he ate and drank the wine, and said, "Come and kiss me." And when Jacob kissed him, Isaac smelled the smell of the field on his clothes, and blessed him fully. "May God give you the dew of heaven and the richness of the earth, an abundance of grain and wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you." Jacob had scarcely left when Esau came in from his hunt and prepared the food and brought it to his father. "Who are you?" Isaac asked. "I am your son, your firstborn, Esau." And Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him. And indeed he will be blessed." When Esau heard this, he cried out with a loud and bitter cry, "Bless me too, my father." But Isaac said, "Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing. His name is Jacob, and rightly so. He has deceived me twice, taking my birthright and now my blessing. Have you not one blessing left for me?" Esau wept aloud, and Isaac answered, "You will live by the sword and serve your brother, but the day will come when you grow restless, and you will throw his yoke from off your neck." And Esau hated Jacob, and said in his heart, "When my father is dead, I will kill my brother." When Rebekah heard of Esau's threat, she told Jacob to flee to her brother Laban in Haran and stay until Esau's fury cooled. And she persuaded Isaac to send Jacob away to find a wife among her people. So Isaac called Jacob and blessed him again and sent him off. And Esau, seeing this, and knowing his Canaanite wives displeased his parents, went and took a wife from among Ishmael's daughters. Jacob set out from Beersheba toward Haran. And when the sun set, he stopped for the night, and took a stone for a pillow, and lay down to sleep. And he dreamed, a stairway resting on the earth, its top reaching to heaven, and angels of God going up and down it. And above it stood the Lord, who said, "I am the God of Abraham and Isaac. The land you are lying on, I will give to you and your offspring, who will be like the dust of the earth, spreading to every direction, and through you all peoples will be blessed. I am with you, and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised." Jacob woke and was afraid, and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. This is none other than the house of God, the gate of heaven." And he set up the stone as a pillar and poured oil on it and named the place Bethel, house of God. And he made a vow, "If God will be with me and watch over me and bring me safely back, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone will be his house, and of all he gives me I will give a tenth back to him." Jacob came at last to the land of the eastern peoples, and saw a well in a field with flocks lying beside it, waiting for the stone to be rolled from its mouth. And he asked the shepherds if they knew Laban, and they said yes. And here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep. And when Jacob saw Rachel, he went and rolled the stone from the well by himself, and watered her flock, and kissed her, and wept aloud, and told her he was her father's relative. And she ran and told her father, and Laban ran to meet Jacob and embraced him and brought him home. And Jacob stayed with him. Laban had 2 daughters, Leah the elder with weak eyes, and Rachel lovely in form and beautiful. And Jacob loved Rachel, and said, "I will work 7 years for you in return for Rachel." And Laban agreed, and Jacob served 7 years, and they seemed like only a few days to him, so great was his love. But when the wedding came, and the night, Laban brought his daughter Leah to Jacob instead, and in the darkness Jacob did not know, and lay with her. And in the morning there was Leah. "What have you done?" Jacob cried. "I served you for Rachel. Why have you deceived me?" And Laban said, "It is not our custom to give the younger before the older. Finish this week's celebration, and I will give you Rachel too." For another 7 years of work, so Jacob did. And he was given Rachel as well, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served another 7 years. And the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, and opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah bore sons, Reuben and Simeon and Levi and Judah, each name a cry of her longing to be loved, and at the last, with Judah a turning to simple praise. And Rachel, seeing she bore nothing, grew desperate and envied her sister, and cried to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." And Jacob grew angry. "Am I in the place of God, who has kept you from having children?" So Rachel gave him her servant Bilhah, and through her had 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali, wrestling with her sister for standing. And Leah, when she stopped bearing, gave her servant Zilpah, who bore Gad and Asher. And there was a bargain over mandrakes between the sisters, and Leah bore again Issachar and Zebulun, and a daughter Dinah. And then God remembered Rachel and opened her womb, and she bore a son, and named him Joseph, and said, "May the Lord add to me another son." Now Jacob wished to return to his own land, and asked Laban to let him go with his wives and children. But Laban did not want to lose him, for he had prospered because of him, and asked him to name his wages. And Jacob made an agreement over the flocks. The speckled and spotted and dark animals would be his, and by careful breeding his flocks grew strong and many, while Laban's grew weak, and Jacob became exceedingly wealthy in flocks and camels and servants. But Laban's sons began to complain that Jacob had taken all that was their father's, and Laban's face turned cold toward him. And the Lord told Jacob, "Go back to the land of your fathers, and I will be with you." So Jacob called Rachel and Leah out to the fields and told them all how their father had cheated him and changed his wages 10 times, but God had protected him. And they answered, "Do whatever God has told you." So while Laban was away shearing sheep, Jacob loaded his family and all his flocks and fled toward Canaan. And Rachel, without telling him, stole her father's household idols. 3 days later, Laban learned they were gone, and pursued them for 7 days, and caught up in the hill country. But God warned Laban in a dream, "Be careful to say nothing to Jacob, good or bad." When Laban reached them, he demanded why Jacob had fled secretly, and carried off his daughters like captives, and why had he stolen his gods. Jacob, not knowing Rachel had taken them, said, "If you find your gods with anyone, that person shall not live." And Laban searched every tent, but Rachel had hidden the idols in her camel's saddle, and sat on them, and she told her father she could not rise, and he found nothing. Then Jacob's anger burst out. 20 years I served you, 14 for your daughters and 6 for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father had not been with me, you would have sent me away with nothing. And Laban, subdued, proposed a covenant. They gathered stones into a heap and made an oath there, calling on God to watch between them when they were apart, and neither would pass that heap to harm the other. And in the morning Laban kissed his grandchildren and daughters, blessed them, and went home. And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him, and he called that place God's camp. But now he faced what he had fled from 20 years before, Esau. He sent messengers ahead to his brother, seeking favor, and they returned saying, "Esau is coming to meet you with 400 men." And Jacob was seized with great fear. He divided his people and flocks into 2 camps, thinking that if Esau attacked one, the other might escape. And he prayed, "I am unworthy of all your kindness. Save me from my brother, for I am afraid he will come and attack me and the mothers with their children. You said you would make my offspring like the sand of the sea." And he prepared a great gift, hundreds of goats and sheep and camels and cattle and donkeys, and sent them ahead in droves, one after another, to soften his brother's face before he saw him. That night, he sent his family across the ford of the Jabbok, and he was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until daybreak, and when the man saw he could not overpower Jacob, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, and it was wrenched. "Let me go," the man said, "for it is dawn." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." "What is your name?" the man asked. "Jacob. Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome." And Jacob asked his name, but the man only blessed him there. And Jacob called the place Peniel. "I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." And the sun rose on him as he limped away, his hip still wrenched. Then Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming with his 400 men. He put the servants and their children in front, then Leah and hers, and Rachel and Joseph last. And he went ahead of them all and bowed to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and threw his arms around him and kissed him, and they wept. "Who are all these?" Esau asked, seeing the women and children. "The children God has given me," Jacob said. And Esau tried to refuse the gift, but Jacob pressed it on him. "To see your face is like seeing the face of God, now that you have received me." And Esau accepted and offered to travel with him. But Jacob said the children and flocks were tender and could not be driven hard, and he would follow slowly. So Esau went back toward Seir, and Jacob journeyed on and settled near the city of Shechem and bought a plot of ground there and built an altar. But there Dinah, Leah's daughter, went out to visit the women of the land, and Shechem, the son of the ruler of that region, saw her and seized her and violated her. And afterward his heart was drawn to her, and he wanted her as his wife, and asked his father Hamor to get her for him. And Hamor came to Jacob to arrange it, offering intermarriage and trade between the peoples. But Dinah's brothers were filled with grief and fury. They answered deceitfully. They would agree, but only if every male in the city was circumcised to become like them. And Hamor and Shechem, eager, persuaded all the men of the city to agree, and they were circumcised. And on the 3rd day, while the men were still in pain, 2 of Dinah's brothers, Simeon and Levi, took their swords and came into the unsuspecting city and killed every male, and killed Hamor and Shechem, and took Dinah from Shechem's house. And the other sons plundered the city and seized the flocks and the women and children. And Jacob was horrified. "You have brought trouble on me, made me a stench to the people of this land. They will unite against me and destroy me." But his sons answered, "Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute?" And God told Jacob to go up to Bethel and settle there and build an altar to the God who had appeared to him when he fled from Esau. So Jacob told his household to get rid of their foreign gods and purify themselves, and they gave him all their idols and their earrings, and he buried them under a tree. And a terror from God fell on the surrounding towns, so that no one pursued them. And at Bethel Jacob built the altar, and God appeared to him again and confirmed his name Israel, and repeated the promise, "Be fruitful, nations and kings will come from you. The land I gave Abraham and Isaac I give to you." But sorrow followed. As they journeyed on, Rachel went into labor, and it was hard, and as her life was slipping away, she named her son Ben-Oni, son of my sorrow. But Jacob named him Benjamin. And Rachel died and was buried on the way to Bethlehem, and Jacob set up a pillar over her grave. And Jacob traveled on and pitched his tent beyond the tower there, and there Reuben lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Jacob heard of it. And Jacob had 12 sons now, the fathers of the tribes of Israel. And Jacob came at last to his father Isaac at Hebron, And Isaac died, old and full of years, 180 years old. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. And Esau's line spread out, and became the nation of Edom in the hill country of Seir. Kings and chiefs, a people of their own. Now Jacob lived in the land of Canaan, and Joseph, 17 years old, tended the flocks with his brothers, and he brought their father a bad report about them. And Israel loved Joseph more than all his other sons, because he was the child of his old age, and he made him a richly ornamented robe. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more, they hated him, and could not speak a kind word to him. Then Joseph had a dream, and told it to them. We were binding sheaves in the field, and my sheaf rose and stood upright, and your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to it. Do you intend to reign over us, they said, and they hated him all the more. And he dreamed again, the sun and moon and 11 stars bowing down to him. And this time even his father rebuked him. Will your mother and I and your brothers actually bow to the ground before you? But his father kept the matter in mind, while his brothers burned with envy. One day the brothers went to graze the flocks near Shechem, and Israel sent Joseph to see how they were. And when they saw him coming from far off, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer. Let's kill him and throw him into a cistern and say a wild animal devoured him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. But Reuben, the eldest, tried to save him and said, Let's not take his life. Throw him into this cistern, but don't lay a hand on him, meaning to rescue him later. So when Joseph reached them, they stripped him of his robe and threw him into the cistern, which was empty, dry. And then they sat down to eat. And they looked up and saw a caravan of traders coming from Gilead, camels loaded with spices, on their way down to Egypt. And Judah said, What do we gain by killing our brother? Let's sell him. He is our own flesh. So they pulled Joseph up and sold him for 20 shekels of silver. And the traders took him to Egypt. Reuben returned to the cistern and found it empty and tore his clothes. The boy is gone. Where can I turn now? And the brothers took Joseph's robe and dipped it in the blood of a slaughtered goat and brought it to their father. We found this. Is it your son's robe? And Jacob recognized it and cried, A wild animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. And he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and mourned for many days and refused all comfort. I will go down to the grave mourning my son. And in Egypt the traders sold Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. At that time Judah went down from his brothers and married a Canaanite woman, who bore him 3 sons, Onan and Shelah. And Judah got a wife named Tamar for his firstborn. But was wicked, and the Lord put him to death. Then Judah told Onan to fulfill his duty to Tamar, to raise up offspring for his brother. But Onan, knowing the child would not be his, spilled his seed on the ground whenever he lay with her, and this was wicked, and the Lord put him to death also. Then Judah told Tamar to live as a widow in her father's house until his youngest Shelah grew up. But he was afraid Shelah would die too, and he did not intend to keep his word. After a long time, Judah's wife died, and Tamar, learning that Judah was going up to shear his sheep and that Shelah had been grown but not given to her, took off her widow's clothes and covered her face with a veil, and sat at the entrance to a town along his way. And Judah, not recognizing her, took her for a prostitute and went into her, promising a young goat as payment, and leaving his seal and cord and staff as a pledge until he sent it. And she conceived by him. Then she rose and put her widow's clothes back on, and when Judah sent the goat to redeem his pledge, the woman could not be found, and no one knew of any prostitute there. 3 months later, Judah was told that Tamar was pregnant, guilty of prostitution. Bring her out and let her be burned to death, he said. But as she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, I am pregnant by the man who owns these. And she showed him the seal and cord and staff. Recognize whose they are, she said. And Judah recognized them, and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I would not give her to my son Shelah." And he did not sleep with her again. And she bore twins, Perez and Zerah, and at the birth one thrust out a hand, and a scarlet thread was tied on it. But he drew it back, and his brother came out first, and the one with the thread came after. And in Egypt the Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered in the house of his Egyptian master. Potiphar saw that the Lord gave him success in everything, and put him in charge of his entire household, and left everything in his care, and was concerned about nothing except the food he ate. And Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a time his master's wife looked on him with desire and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "My master has withheld nothing from me but you, because you are his wife. How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And day after day she pressed him, and he refused, and would not even be with her. Then one day, when none of the household servants were inside, she caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." And he ran, leaving his cloak in her hand. And she screamed for the servants and accused him. "He came to make sport of me, and when I screamed he ran and left his cloak." And she kept the cloak until Potiphar came home, and told him the same. And Potiphar burned with anger, and put Joseph in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were held. But the Lord was with Joseph in prison, and gave him favor in the eyes of the warden, who put him in charge of all the prisoners and everything done there, and paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care. And in time, 2 of Pharaoh's officials, his cupbearer and his baker, offended their master and were thrown into that same prison, and were placed in Joseph's care. And each of them had a dream the same night, and in the morning Joseph saw they were troubled. "Why so sad?" he asked. "We had dreams, and there is no one to interpret them." "Do not interpretations belong to God?" Joseph said. "Tell me." The cupbearer told his, "A vine with 3 branches that budded and blossomed and ripened into grapes, which he pressed into Pharaoh's cup and put in his hand." "3 branches are 3 days," Joseph said. "Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your place, and you will put the cup in his hand as before." And he asked the cupbearer to remember him and speak of him to Pharaoh, for he had been stolen from the land of the Hebrews and had done nothing to deserve prison. Then the baker, encouraged, told his dream: 3 baskets of bread on his head, and birds eating from the top basket. And Joseph said, 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift off your head, and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh. And on the 3rd day, Pharaoh's birthday, he restored the cupbearer and hanged the baker, just as Joseph had said. But the cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. 2 full years passed, and Pharaoh dreamed. He stood by the Nile, and out of the river came 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. And after them came 7 more cows, gaunt and ugly, and they ate up the 7 fat cows, and still looked as gaunt as before. And he woke, and slept, and dreamed again. 7 heads of grain, full and healthy, growing on one stalk, and after them 7 thin heads, scorched by the east wind, and the thin heads swallowed the full ones. And in the morning Pharaoh's mind was troubled, and he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, and none could interpret the dreams. Then the cupbearer remembered. He told Pharaoh of the young Hebrew in the prison who had interpreted his dream and the bakers, and everything had happened just as he said. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and they hurried him from the dungeon, and he shaved and changed his clothes, and came before Pharaoh. "I had a dream," Pharaoh said, "and no one can interpret it, but I hear you can." Joseph answered, "I cannot, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." So Pharaoh told his dreams, and Joseph said, "The 2 dreams are one. God has revealed what he is about to do." The 7 good cows and the 7 good heads are 7 years of great abundance coming to all Egypt. And the 7 lean cows and the withered heads are 7 years of famine that will follow and consume the land, so severe that the abundance will be forgotten, for the famine will be terrible. And the dream was given twice, because the matter is firmly decided by God, and he will do it soon. Let Pharaoh find a wise man and put him in charge of the land, and let commissioners collect 1/5 of the harvest during the 7 good years, and store the grain in the cities under Pharaoh's authority, to be kept for the 7 years of famine, so the land will not be ruined. The plan pleased Pharaoh and all his officials. Can we find anyone like this man, in whom is the Spirit of God? He said. And to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so wise. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall submit to your command. Only in the throne will I be greater than you. And he took the signet ring from his own hand, and put it on Joseph's, and dressed him in fine linen and a gold chain, and had him ride in a chariot as his second in command. And men called out before him to bow down. And Joseph was 30 years old when he entered Pharaoh's service, and he was given a wife, and went out over all the land of Egypt. And the 7 years of abundance came, and the land produced in great plenty, and Joseph gathered grain like the sand of the sea, so much it could not be measured. And in those years 2 sons were born to him, Manasseh, for God had made him forget his trouble and his father's household, and Ephraim, for God had made him fruitful in the land of his suffering. Then the 7 years of abundance ended, and the years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in every land, but in Egypt there was bread. And when the Egyptians grew hungry and cried to Pharaoh, he sent them to Joseph, and Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain. And all the world came to Egypt to buy, because the famine was severe everywhere. And Jacob in Canaan learned there was grain in Egypt, and said to his sons, "Why do you sit looking at one another? Go down and buy grain that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's own brother, for he feared harm might come to him. And the brothers came and bowed down before Joseph with their faces to the ground. And he recognized them, but they did not recognize him. And he remembered his dreams, and he spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" "From Canaan, to buy food." "You are spies," he said. "Come to see where the land is unprotected." "No, my lord," they said. "We are honest men, 12 brothers, sons of one man. The youngest is with our father, and one is no more." "You are spies," Joseph insisted, "and to prove your story, one of you must go and bring back your youngest brother, while the rest stay bound in prison." And he put them all in custody for 3 days. On the 3rd day he softened the terms. "Let one brother stay behind, and the rest carry grain home, but bring back the youngest, or you will not see my face again." And they said to one another, not knowing Joseph understood their language, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, and we would not listen." And Reuben said, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? Now we must account for his blood." And Joseph turned away from them and wept, then came back and had Simeon bound before their eyes. And he ordered their sacks filled with grain, and secretly had each man's silver returned in his sack, and gave them provisions for the journey. And on the way home, one of them opened his sack and found his silver, and their hearts sank, and they trembled. "What is this that God has done to us?" They told Jacob everything: the harsh Lord, the demand for Benjamin, Simeon held hostage. And as they emptied their sacks, each found his pouch of silver, and they were frightened, and so was their father. Jacob cried out, "You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is gone, Simeon is gone, and now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me." Reuben offered his own 2 sons as forfeit if he failed to bring Benjamin back, but Jacob refused. "My son will not go down with you. His brother is dead, and he is all I have left. If harm comes to him, you will bring my grey head down to the grave in sorrow." But the famine was still severe, and when the grain from Egypt was gone, Jacob told them to go back for more. And Judah reminded him, "The man warned us we cannot see his face without our brother. Send Benjamin with me, and I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me responsible. If I do not bring him back, let me bear the blame forever." And Israel, with no choice left, agreed. "Take gifts, the best products of the land, balm and honey and spices and nuts. Take double the silver to return what was in your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother and go. And may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he releases Simeon and Benjamin. And if I am bereaved, I am bereaved." So they went down to Egypt again and stood before Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he told the steward of his house to bring the men inside and prepare a meal, for they would dine with him at noon. And the brothers were afraid, thinking it was because of the silver, and they explained to the steward at the door how they had found it in their sacks and brought it back. "It's all right," the steward said. "Your God must have given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver." And he brought Simeon out to them. When Joseph came home, they presented their gifts and bowed low, and he asked about their aged father. "Is he still living?" "He is," they said, and bowed again. And Joseph looked up and saw Benjamin, his own mother's son, and asked, "Is this your youngest brother?" "God be gracious to you, my son." And he was so moved that he hurried out and went into his private room and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out, controlling himself, and ordered the food served. And they were seated before him in order of their ages, from the firstborn to the youngest, and they looked at one another in astonishment. And portions were served from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as anyone else's. And they feasted and drank freely with him. Then Joseph instructed his steward, "Fill their sacks with as much grain as they can carry, and put each man's silver in his sack, and put my own silver cup in the mouth of the youngest one's sack." And it was done. In the morning the men were sent on their way, but before they had gone far, Joseph sent his steward after them. "Why have you repaid good with evil? Why have you stolen my master's silver cup, the one he uses for divination?" And when he caught them, they protested, "Far be it from us. We even brought back the silver we found. If any of us has it, let him die, and the rest of us will become slaves." "Very well," the steward said, "but only the one who has it will become my slave. The rest are free." And they lowered their sacks, and the steward searched from the oldest to the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. And they tore their clothes and loaded their donkeys and turned back to the city. Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house and threw themselves to the ground before him. "What have you done?" Joseph said. "Don't you know a man like me can find things out?" And Judah said, "What can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered our guilt. We are all your slaves now." But Joseph said, "Only the man who took the cup will be my slave. The rest of you, go back to your father in peace." Then Judah stepped forward and made his plea. He told the whole story, how their father loved this youngest boy, the only one left of his mother, how his brother was gone, how their father's life was bound up in the boy's life, how they had sworn to bring him back, how Judah himself had guaranteed his safety. "If I go back without the boy," Judah said, "my father will die of grief, and his grey head will go down to the grave in sorrow, and it will be my fault forever. Please let me stay as your slave in the boy's place, and let him go back with his brothers. How can I return to my father if the boy is not with me? I could not bear to see the misery that would come on him." And Joseph could no longer control himself. He sent all his attendants out of the room so that no Egyptian was present, and he wept so loudly that the household heard it. And word reached Pharaoh's palace, and he said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But they could not answer, they were so terrified. "Come close to me," he said. and they came near. I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. But do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. There have been 2 years of famine, and there are 5 more to come, with no plowing and no harvest. God sent me before you to preserve a remnant and to save your lives by a great deliverance, so it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me ruler over all Egypt. Hurry back to my father and tell him his son Joseph is Lord of Egypt, and bring him down, and I will provide for you all, or you will lose everything." And he threw his arms around Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin wept on his shoulder, and he kissed all his brothers and wept over them, and afterward they talked with him. And Pharaoh was pleased when he heard that Joseph's brothers had come, and he told Joseph to send them back with carts to bring their father and their households. "Do not worry about your belongings, for the best of all Egypt is yours." So Joseph gave them carts and provisions, and to each new clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 sets of clothes. And to his father he sent donkeys loaded with the good things of Egypt. And as they left he told them, "Do not quarrel on the way." They went up out of Egypt and came to their father in Canaan, and told him, "Joseph is still alive. He is ruler over all Egypt." And Jacob was stunned. He did not believe them. But when they told him everything Joseph had said, and he saw the carts Joseph had sent, his spirit revived, and he said, "I'm convinced. My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." So Israel set out with all he had, and came to Beersheba, and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to him in a vision of the night, "Jacob, Jacob. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down with you, and I will surely bring you back again, and Joseph's own hand will close your eyes." So Jacob left Beersheba, and his sons carried their father and their wives and children in the carts, and they brought their livestock and all they had, and came into Egypt, Jacob and all his offspring, 70 in all, the whole house of Israel. And Jacob sent Judah ahead to Joseph to get directions to Goshen. And Joseph had his chariot made ready, and went to meet his father, and when he appeared, he threw his arms around him, and wept a long time. And Israel said, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen your face and know you are still alive." Joseph settled his family in the land of Goshen, the best of the land, as Pharaoh allowed, and he provided them with food. And he brought his father before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh, and Pharaoh asked his age, and Jacob answered, 130 years. Few and hard have been my years, and they do not equal the years of my fathers. And the famine grew so severe that the people of Egypt spent all their silver on grain, and then their livestock, and then their land, and finally themselves, selling everything to Pharaoh for food, until the land belonged to Pharaoh, and the people were his servants. And a law was set that 1/5 of the harvest would go to Pharaoh, all but the land of the priests. But Israel settled in Goshen, and acquired property there, and were fruitful, and increased greatly. Jacob lived 17 years in Egypt, and the time drew near for him to die. And he called Joseph and made him swear not to bury him in Egypt, but to carry him back and lay him with his fathers. And Joseph swore it. And afterward, when Joseph was told his father was ill, he took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, to him. And Israel rallied his strength and sat up, and told again of the God who had appeared to him at Bethel, and promised the land. And he claimed Joseph's 2 sons as his own, as Reuben and Simeon were. And he blessed them. But when Joseph placed Manasseh, the elder, at his father's right hand, and Ephraim at his left, Israel crossed his arms, laying his right hand on Ephraim, the younger, and his left on Manasseh. And Joseph tried to move his father's hand. "Not so, my father, this one is the firstborn." But his father refused. "I know, my son, I know. He too will become a people and be great, but his younger brother will be greater, and his descendants will become a group of nations." And so he blessed the younger above the elder, as it had been with him and Esau, with him and his own brother, the pattern turning once more. Then Jacob called all his sons together to tell them what would happen to them in the days to come. And one by one he spoke over them, over Reuben, who had defiled his father's bed and would no longer excel, over Simeon and Levi, whose swords were weapons of violence, whom he would scatter in Israel, over Judah, whom his brothers would praise and before whom they would bow, a lion's cub from whom the scepter would not depart, to whom the obedience of nations would belong, over Zebulun by the sea, and Issachar the strong donkey, and Dan who would judge his people, and Gad and Asher with rich food, and Naphtali the doe set free, and over Joseph, the fruitful vine, blessed above his brothers, and over Benjamin, the ravenous wolf, each blessing suited to each son, the whole future of a people spoken over 12 men in a tent. And when he had finished, he charged them again to bury him in the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah and Leah were buried. And when he had finished speaking, he drew his feet up into the bed, and breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. And Joseph threw himself on his father, and wept over him, and kissed him. And he commanded the physicians to embalm him, and it took 40 days, and the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. Then, with Pharaoh's blessing, Joseph went up to bury his father, and a great company went with him. His brothers, his father's household, the officials of Egypt, chariots and horsemen, a very large gathering. And they came to Canaan, and mourned there with great and solemn lamentation 7 days, and his sons carried him to the cave in the field of Machpelah, and buried him there, as he had made them swear. And they returned to Egypt. Now that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers were afraid. What if Joseph holds a grudge and pays us back for all the wrong we did? And they sent word to him, claiming their father had asked him to forgive their sin, and they came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves." But Joseph wept when their message came, and he said to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. And Joseph stayed in Egypt, he and his father's family, and he lived 110 years, and saw his children's children to the 3rd generation. And when he was about to die, he said to his brothers, "I am about to die. But God will surely come to your aid, and bring you up out of this land to the land he promised to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." And he made them swear an oath, "When God comes to your aid, you must carry my bones up from this place." So Joseph died at 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was placed in a coffin in Egypt, and there it waited, the coffin, and the oath, and the promise, in a land that was not their own, for a rescue that had not yet come.